Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pursuit of Love podcast. I'm Mark Etchison, and I'm so grateful that you joined us today. Here at Pursuit of Love, it's our purpose to help you to live each day of your life as a disciple of Jesus Christ, learning from Him how to live moment by moment in God's presence and in His power and in His love. So this podcast is coming out a week late, and I'd like to apologize for that. The one that would have been scheduled for today, I'm going to have come out probably Wednesday or Thursday this week. I'm a little behind, as most of you that are part of our podcast know. I'm pastor at Maylow United Methodist Church. I'm also the minister of discipleship at First United Methodist in Stanley, and I'm the pastor at Gateway Cowboy Church that meets on Monday nights. And so my plate has gotten full as of late, and trying to work out maybe a few different things. And so there's some things in the works that we're going to do things a little bit differently moving forward, but I still hope to have a podcast probably from my sermon each week coming up. I'm still working out the details on that, but I just wanted to take a moment to say I'm sorry that the podcast is a week late this week, and of course today's podcast will come out in a few days, and it'll be ready to go, Lord willing, around Wednesday is what I'm hoping for. So thank you for your patience with me. We're still doing our Tree of Life teaching this week. We're starting to talk about disciplined grace, and I did a podcast on disciplined grace a few months back, and this is similar to that with a little bit different focus. And I'm doing this during the season of Lent. It goes with the Tree of Life teaching, and it just so happens that it kind of timed very well with the season of Lent when we talk about spiritual disciplines in the church anyway. So I hope this is helpful to you. I'll turn you over to the teaching and see you at the end of the teaching in just a few moments. God bless. Everybody doing all right today? Everybody's good? All right. All right. So trying to get this pulled up here. Okay, in case y'all are wondering what I do is I pull up my clock so I can try to honor y'all's time. But I told John that we started 2 minutes late, so I may run about 30 minutes over today. That math checks out, right? Where's our state student? Does that check out? 2 minutes over gives me 30 minutes. Is that how that works? No? Okay. I was thinking there was some kind of exponential math in there. I don't know. So today I want to talk about, this is the beginning of our season of Lent. The 40 days of Lent represent it's not 40 days of Lent, but if you take out the Sundays, it's 40 days. And so that represents Jesus's 40 days in the desert, which is why we practice disciplines such as fasting or solitude during Lent. That's where our practice of giving something up for Lent came from. It echoes back to Jesus's 40 days in the desert. And so there's that passage there. But I want to ask you to just think about this for a moment. Why do you suppose the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness for 40 days of solitude and silence and fasting before his temptation? And just think about it a moment. Don't answer out loud. Just think about it a moment. Why do you suppose God did that? I've heard it suggested that God did it to put Jesus in the weakest position possible so that the temptation would really hurt. I don't think that's the case. I think what really was happening in that 40 days is the Spirit was sending Jesus into a place of preparation. For instance, the first temptation was that he would turn stones into bread. Now, I don't understand all of the ins and outs of that. We will talk about this a little more in detail in a couple of weeks. But just understand that for God's purposes through Jesus, he could not give in to this temptation to turn the stones into bread, even though he was hungry. Satan was trying to throw Jesus off the path for our redemption. And that was a part of how he was to throw Jesus off the path. And so Jesus needed to resist this temptation. So what God did is he sent him into a place for 40 days where he could experience the truth that man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Jesus knew that scripture, of course. We all know that scripture. But it doesn't necessarily mean we know it. If I were to ask you guys, do you believe the Bible is true? Raise your hand if you believe that the Bible is true. Okay. So you believe that all things work together for good for them that love the Lord and are called according to His purposes. Y'all believe that, right? How many of you worried about anything this past week? You see the discrepancy there, right? I believe it, and we're like the man that Jesus said he was going to cast out the demon in the son, and he says, all things possible for them that believe, and the man said, I believe, help my unbelief. I believe, I'm just not all the way there yet. And what this time in the desert did for Jesus was to let him experience. You know, you can know things in your mind that you don't know in your body. You hadn't experienced it. You can't live as if it's so until it gets into you. And I want to demonstrate. Terry, you got your hymnal there? Turn to page 368. We're going to have a contest this morning. Y'all want to see Terry and I have a contest this morning? Anybody up for that? Y'all are the judges. Okay, when we get through, I'm going to ask you by a clap of hands who won. So this is one of my favorite hymns. My hope is built. So Terry, I want you to play, the first little bit. Just looking at the page, just play it. Okay, that's enough. It's my turn. Okay. I told you this is my favorite hymn. It's middle C, right?
It starts with middle C.
And that's F-A-C-E. It'll be right here. Wait, y'all stop clearing your throats. I'm working on this. No. Is that right?
A. Then a C.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Okay, I'm through. Okay, by way of applause, if you think I won that, give me a round of applause. Okay. Ethan, yeah, he's trying to get out of something today. I don't know what that is, but he's trying to get out of something today. All right, so who thinks that Terry won that contest? Yeah, gracious. Anyway, woman, submit, never mind. Okay, now here's the crazy thing about it. Now, I've already put, can you hand me the hymnal? You got it still? Right here? I'll give it back to you. Okay, here's the crazy thing about this demonstration. If you were to give Terry and me a test on that, I would pass it. I would pass it. If you gave me enough time, I would ace it just like Terry. I mean, I know that this is in the key of F. I know it has one flat, and that flat is B flat, right? It's in the key signature of the key. The time signature is 3/4, which means that the quarter note gets the note, and there are 3 notes per measure. I know all of that. I know that that's middle C. I know that the lines are every good boy does fine, E, F, whatever. And all cows eat grass and FAC. I could pass this just as good as Terry as far as knowing everything about it. And I could eventually play every note. If I had enough time, I could play every note in that song. So why is it that Terry was so much better at playing it than I am? Because I wasn't putting on. That was the best I've got. Why is it that Terry was so much better than me? Somebody answer. Practice. Yeah. I actually took piano lessons years ago, and I was so bad, I didn't quit. My teacher quit. That's how bad I was. After 4 months, she was like, I'm no longer teaching piano. And now she's the music leader at Common Ground, which is pretty funny. But the difference is what I have in my head, Terry has in his body. He can sit at the piano and he sees the notes in his hands. He don't have to think, middle C, there's middle C, that's middle C, right? And then, that's an A. So if this is C, then that's B, then that's... He didn't have to do all that. His hands just naturally go to it. Through practice. His hands have done it so many times. His eyes have done it so many times that it's, what do we call it? It's natural for him. And that's why he could play that. I didn't tell him ahead of time that we were going to play that song, but he just sat right down, and right before I preached, I said, I'm going to use you for an illustration. That's the first inkling he had if we were going to do anything. And I still didn't tell him what it was. And he sat down and played it because Terry has disciplined himself to the point that he can play the notes when they need to be played. I can play the notes, but not when they need to be played, for y'all to have any clue what in the world I'm playing. Right? Now see, that is what discipline is. Now the title of this message, it says in your bulletin, discipled grace. It's supposed to be disciplined grace. And I'm just going to walk down here for the rest of this message because I'm going to be doing a lot of showing you things. Let's see if my Bible will stay here too. So I used the illustration about all things work together for good for them that love the Lord. If you go down to the rest of that passage, it says things like, if God is for us, who can be against us? He who didn't spare his own son, but graciously gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It's God who justifies. What that means is nobody can actually say anything bad about me and it matter, because God has said good things about me. Who can condemn me? Jesus Christ died for me. More than that, he was raised. Indeed, he's at the right hand of the Father interceding for us. If I really believe that in my mind and in my body, I can live as if it's true. See, when you really believe something, you can live as if it's true. You can connect to the grace of God in such a way that you live that out. Okay? Remember, the last few weeks I've talked about God's grace, that presence surrounding us, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The way we live in connection with that grace is by living out the truth that is in the Scriptures. The truth that God is with you. God is for you. And there is nothing that he can or won't do to bring goodness and blessing into your life. Now see, here's the deal. When you really believe that, you will be set free from sin. The reason we still struggle with sin is because we don't really believe that. Jesus said, if you abide in my words, if you live in my words, then you're truly my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, what does it set you free from? Well, when he said that to the Pharisees said, we're Abraham's children. What are you talking about free? We've always been free. And he said, anybody who commits a sin is a slave to sin. The freedom that Jesus is talking about there is freedom from sin. But the only way we get free is through abiding in, practicing his words. Freedom does not just mean freedom from. I was perfectly free to go up there and play that song perfectly. Nobody was stopping me. Nobody told me that I couldn't. But just because I'm allowed to do something, just because you have permission to do something, doesn't mean you're free to do it. Because if you're not able to do it, you still don't have freedom. Freedom actually comes through discipline. If you want to run a marathon, if you want to be free, nobody's stopping you from going out and running 26.2 miles. You're allowed to do it, but the question is, have you gone through the discipline to enable you to be able to do it? And it's the same thing with holiness. It's the same thing with righteousness. We are free, of course, to do what's good and right. We're just not able to do it. Am I hitting this? Maybe we can bring it down. Maybe that'll help. And I'll try to be a little more still. It's probably not going to work. Brad's just shaking his head like, no, you're not going to be more still. Okay, so when we abide in His words, then we're truly His disciples. Paul says it a little bit differently in Romans 6, and we talked about this a little bit with our Ash Wednesday service. But listen to this. He says in verse 1, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means. How can we who died to sin still live in it? Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into His death? We were buried therefore with Him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. For if we've been united with Him in a death like His, we shall certainly be united with Him in a resurrection like His. We know that our old self was crucified with Him in order that the body of sin, listen to this, in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. So what is the body of sin? What does he mean by that? He can't just be talking about our physical bodies, because Jesus had a physical body and He didn't have this body of sin. He was free from sin. So what is he talking about? Well, our bodies are made in such a way, and that's what I was demonstrating with Terry. Our bodies are made in such a way that they learn things, don't they? Like Terry's body has learned to play the piano. I had the right instruction, the information in my mind, but my body hasn't learned to do it, so it couldn't do it. It's the same thing with speaking. Your body just naturally knows how to speak, doesn't it? Can you imagine if like a little child, I had to think about every word that I said before I formed it? Can you imagine how long my sermons would be then? You're probably thinking they're long enough now. I can't imagine if you had to think about every word that you formed. But see, our bodies just learn how to do that. It's just natural with us. And God made us that way because it's hard to live life if the everyday things you have to think about. I learned Gaston County English just by being around my Gaston County family and friends. That's why I talk the way I do. That's why I still say y'all. And if I want to try to not speak Gaston County English, I have to be very, very intentional and careful, or y'all will slip out. Right? I know people that write incredibly well, and in conversation they have the worst grammar imaginable. It's because when they're writing, they can take their time and they know the rules, the grammar rule, the grammatical rules, but they have learned to speak in ways that aren't grammatically correct. And so when you're in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, or just in a conversation, what your body knows to do is what it does. It's the same thing with walking, all the things that we learn. Has anybody ever, you go to work the same way, most of us go to work the same way every day, right? And let's say Friday afternoon you saw a sign that said construction begins Monday. And you go, I am not going to go that way Monday because I don't want to get stuck in this construction. You set yourself a reminder for when you get up, don't go the normal way. You got to go the other way. And you're like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then you put it in your mind, your intention is to go a different way. And then as you're getting on with your morning, something happens with the kids, or something happens with the job, or something, you spill something on your clothes, or whatever, and you just go on autopilot. When you go on autopilot, what happens? You're sitting there in construction. I just said I wasn't going to go this way. Well, see, what happens is in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, you've got to tend to things that are in front of you, and your body goes, don't worry, I know how to get us to work. And it just takes, all of us had the experience. You've driven for 2 hours, and you're like, I don't remember anything from these last 2 hours. How did I get here? How am I not dead? Well, the reason you're not dead is because your body knows how to drive. It doesn't have to consult your conscious mind. And the reason that it's so dangerous to drive with a new driver is because their body don't know what to do yet. When something darts out in front of them, they go, okay, my foot's on the accelerator. What do I need to do next? I need to stop. Boom. Bambi's dead. Because they didn't have that quick reaction time. Sorry, Ari. Sorry. Now see, the body of sin, I'm making a point here. The body of sin, just like I learned Gaston County English by being around Gaston Countyans, Is that even a word? The way I learned to walk, the way I learned to drive, all of those things became natural for me. Paul says that when we're born, we are dead in trespasses and sins. So the way we learn to live our lives, the way we learn to interact with one another, is as if God is not there. We don't know how to live in the grace of God because we've been living apart from it. Now, when you're born again, you have reconnected to that grace, and that's all well and good, but it's kind of like going a different way to work. In the hustle and bustle, you might wake up in the morning saying, today I'm going to live in the grace of God. And then life takes over. And then when life takes over, your body of sin, what your body has learned to live apart from God takes over. And you say and you do and you respond to things the way you just always have. So Paul says we have to do away with the body of sin so that we'll no longer be enslaved to sin. Same thing Jesus is saying. When we abide in his words, then we'll be set free. We're set free by setting aside the body of sin. These habits, my habitual way. Blessing those who curse me is not normal in this world. It's the way the kingdom would do things. It is the way of grace. But when somebody curses me, when I was apart from God, when somebody cursed me, that hurt me so deeply that I had to do something to get some of my dignity back. See, that's what happens when somebody curses you. It takes your dignity down. If somebody just looks at you the wrong way, it hurts, doesn't it? Because it undignifies you. And we desperately need dignity. We were actually made for that. And so what we do is we got to get it back. And the way we get it back is we strike back. If we have a bigger personality, maybe we'll go at them. If not, then we go behind their backs and talk about them. But we have to do something to rescue our dignity, to get it back from somebody else, because God's not there to dignify us, because we're separated from him. He's there, but we're not living in interaction with him. So we've got to do what we got to do. And then when we become born again, Jesus says, bless those who curse you. You go, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. And you think, oh, I can do this. This is nothing. And then somebody curses you, and that dignity is stolen from you. And you think, I need to curse them. Or you think, maybe you think the thought, I need to bless them. But what happens is your body says, whoa, no. We've got to get our dignity back. And often your body has jumped out and responded before you even get a chance. Anybody had that experience? Somebody blows the horn at you in traffic? You've responded in a way you didn't intend to respond before you even knew what was going on. Because of the body of sin. It's just your habits. God has made us to learn habits, and by and large, that's a really good thing. That's why we can talk and walk and still do things while we're talking and walking, because talking and walking has been a habit. But unfortunately, cursing those who curse us is a habit as well. And instead of turning the other cheek, striking back is a habit. Lying is a habit. Lying is a way that we have learned to manage our world. I heard the story of a little girl in Sunday school. She was asked, what is a lie? She said, it's an abomination to God and a very present help in time of trouble. She got her scriptures mixed up. But the reason we lie, if you have trouble with truthfulness, the reason you do that is because you have learned to manage your world. Instead of trusting God, you've trusted the ability to hide the truth with your words. And so if we're going to become a person that's transparent and truthful, if we're going to become a person that blesses those who curse us and turns the other cheek and do all the things that Jesus taught, the body of sin has to be brought to nothing. See, Paul's laying all this out for us. In Romans 5, he talks about this grace in which we stand. I've talked about this the last couple of weeks. In Romans 6, he starts to show us how to step into this. In Romans 7, he talks about the middle of the road. He talks about when I really want to do what's right, but I can't. He says it a little bit different at the end of Romans 7. But after he's talked about, if you've ever read it, it's kind of dizzying. He says, the thing I want to do, I don't do, and I try to do this, and I do this, and when I do good, evil's right there with me, and it goes just in circles, which is how we feel sometimes. I mean, you start trying to do the thing Jesus said, and you'll find out that that's your experience. Then Paul says, when you were slaves of sin, you were free in regard... Oh, no, sorry. Went to the wrong spot. Here we go. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being. But I see in my members... What's your members? Your eyebrows, your hands, your tongue... The psalmist talks about the law of kindness, or I think it's Proverbs, talks about the law of kindness being in your tongue. Not in your head, in your tongue. See? I delight in the law in my inner being, but I see in my members another law, waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me, instead of body of sin, he says here, who will deliver me from this body of death? But then he says, praise be to God who gives us the victory through Jesus Christ. Now see, the way to become adept at holiness is to undergo a life in which, number one, you immerse yourself in Jesus' teachings. You take the Sermon on the Mount. You say, I'm going to live that. And you step out and you try to live it. But then you find out that you get messed up left and right because there's a law at war in your members. Your hand takes off, flies out the window at that driver before you even knew what was going on. Your mouth takes off, cursing that person that cursed you, before you even knew what to do. Your eyebrows, I talked about last week, I think, or a couple weeks ago, the lady who said that she had scolded her grandchild, and later, about an hour later, she said, Grandma, will you quit being mad at me? And she said, I'm not mad at you anymore. And she said, well, your face still is. And so we do that. We look at our kids with brows furrowed and angry voice. We go, I'm not mad. Could have fooled me. And see, in our mind, we don't want to be mad. We go, I know Jesus said something about laying aside anger, so I'm just not going to be mad. But then we find our body has already carried us into anger before we realize it. And so not only do we try really hard to do the things that Jesus said, but we have to train. The way that Terry became good at that music is by playing the music, but he also had to do different things to train his body to move with the music when he was supposed to. My son Caleb, he's also a pianist. He's at Gardner Webb. Neat story about Caleb. A few years ago, we went to a college up north. I don't know if I've told y'all this story or not. But they told him, we put him before their piano professor because he had been taught by Amy his whole life, and we wanted to know what he needed to work on in this last year in order to be ready for college. And this professor, Caleb didn't know what to play, so he just kind of started playing some chords. And the professor stopped him in about 10 seconds and said, just quit. He said, you can't do it. You don't have it. He said, I've been doing this so long. He said, I can walk in the room and see out of the corner of my eye whether somebody has it or not. You don't. You're too old. You've gone too far. You've learned bad habits. They're too ingrained in you. You can't get ready for college. He told my son that. And so I want to tell you some of the teachings I've learned about turning the other cheek and not saying things. I really had to put them into practice in that moment. And Caleb didn't touch the piano for a couple of months, wasn't it? 3 months. Then it was his life. And he was just shattered. We were telling him, you got it. He's like, of course you say I've got it. You're my parents. But this is the professional. And he said, I don't. But we ended up finding a guy, Chad Pollard, who was the worship leader over what's the church? Parkwood Baptist. And Chad listened to him play, watched him play, and he said, no, I think this guy's wrong. He said, I think with hard work we can get you ready.
So Caleb worked hard. He spent hours and hours and hours on end. In fact, one time he was having this problem in his side. We thought something bad was going wrong with him. Went to the doctor, went back and forth several times. They're like, there's nothing going on. I don't understand. There's nothing interiorly wrong. And finally I told the doctor, I was like, well, he does play piano for about 7 or 8 hours a day. She said, you should have led with that. His abdomen was spasming from being at the piano so much. He did get into college with piano. He got a scholarship. As a freshman, he won the Freshman Music Award. As a sophomore, he won the music award for the entire university. Now, that was a chance to brag on my son for a second. But this is what I really want. This is the point I really want to make with that. Have you ever just felt like, I'm never going to get beyond this? I'm never going to stop criticizing people. I'm never going to be able to stop lying. I'm never going to be able to do the thing. Have you ever just felt like that I'm never going to be like Jesus? It just feels hopeless. The truth is, it's not hopeless. It's just that you haven't entered into... Caleb didn't just immerse himself in the pieces that he had to learn to play. He would go to the teacher once a week, and the teacher would say, you're not getting enough separation in those notes because of the way you're holding your fingers. And he would give Caleb these drills that drove us crazy, but they would be things that he would do, not the music. They would be these little drills that he would do over and over and over for hours on end so that his hands would know how to move when it was playing the notes. Because when you're playing those notes, it goes like that. You can't he can't be thinking, how am I supposed to move my fingers again? Because it won't work that way. If he does that, then when he stands in front of the board to get into college, he's not going to be able to play it well. The only way he's going to be able to play it well if his fingers know how to move without him thinking. And so he did those drills so that when he would sit in front of the music, his hands would move naturally the way it was supposed to, so that he could concentrate on the notes, not on his fingers. Now, what disciplined grace does, what things like fasting and solitude and worship, and we're going to talk about these in the coming weeks, what they do is they teach us to move with grace in all aspects of our lives, so that we're in the moment of need, somebody's cursing us, we already know how to move with grace. Because when somebody's cursing you, it's not the time to figure out, how do I move with God in this situation? The only way it works is if you already have that ingrained in your body, how to move with God. You want your natural response to a curse to be blessing. There is hope to become like Jesus, but we have to be intentional about putting aside this body of death, this body of sin. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to give you some practices that you can take into your life. And I want to give you my full assurance, money back guarantee, that if you'll do it, just like Chad Pollard told Caleb, I'm going to tell every one of you, I see in every one of you the potential to be like Christ, to be substantially transformed, to be like Christ. And if you will do the things that Jesus did, and these are just things that Jesus did, and you put them into practice, then I can assure you that God will lead you into a life of holiness and of power in His name. Won't you pray with me? Dearest Father, we are so grateful for your presence with us. And we're grateful that you have given us a clear path to becoming the people that you called us to be. And so I ask, Lord, right now this morning, that you will fill us with hope that we really can be these kind of people. And I ask, Father, that as we walk, that you will show us the things that are in us that are opposed to your kingdom, and that you will lead us by wisdom and grace into the things that we need to do to remove those and to add in your way of living. Make this easy and natural for us, that we can shine your light into the darkness of this world with joy and peace, no matter what we face. We ask you this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. And everybody said,
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. Once again, I appreciate your patience with us. I hope that teaching was helpful to you. I hope to see you again in just a few days on the podcast. But until then, it's my prayer that you will live each day of this coming week as a disciple of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much. God bless.